Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Climate Action Planning Committee to order. Let's begin with the first item on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes. Has everybody been able to access and review the draft minutes from the January meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
I move that they be adopted, Mr. Chairman.
Second. Excellent. And this is to be a roll call, right? So, Lisa?
Yes.
Aye. Mary?
Aye.
Yes. Okay. And I vote yes. Excellent. Now, on to the second topic. This was added this week, in light of, the need for Tracy Dyke-Redmond to step down from the committee. And I think probably worth saying just a few words about what happened there, to be public about it. Tracy, late in 2023, started a new position as the Director of Public Utilities at the Department of Public Utilities. And so, being a very conscientious person, she reached out to the State Ethics Commission just to make sure that there are no conflicts of interest between that role and this work. And really, the guidance she received from them didn't suggest that there had been any conflict of interest yet, but that if any matters involving Milton came before the DPU, it would constrain her ability to do her job there. And so she felt that it was necessary to step down before anything like that came up. So I'm personally very sorry to lose her contributions to this committee. I support her decision. And that leaves us with a vacancy. So Tracy was one of the two members appointed by the select board. And so the select board will eventually fill that vacancy. Often they're interested in having recommendations from the committee as to who to nominate. So we have a few minutes here to discuss a process for filling the vacancies and any candidates we may want to consider suggesting. Now I only got these today, but I'll just list them off. There were 5 applicants from the first round that may or may not still be interested, and then we may want to consider posting the vacancy again. So that's something we can discuss, but where did I write it down? So the 5 applicants who had applied previously were Matt Panucci, who's the president of Friends of the Blue Hills, Richard Bowler, who was previously served on the warrant committee and the planning board, Stephen Popkin, Joseph Madugno, and Kimberly Johnson. So I will make sure that their applications get distributed to you all after this meeting. I suggest that we consider voting on a recommendation at our next meeting. So with that introduction, let me open the floor to any other thoughts or discussion.
Chairman, I just offer that sounds like an appropriate approach. We make a recommendation based upon vote at the next meeting, forwarded to the select board, and anticipate the select board approval of the recommendation of the Climate Action Planning Committee. Would it be appropriate for us as a committee, in the meantime, to acknowledge with gratitude the service of Tracy, and wish her the very best in her new endeavors.
I like it. They're voting on that. So moved.
I'll second.
Yes, I agree.
Oh, excellent. All right, all in favor of acknowledging Tracy Duck Redmond's service with gratitude and appreciation, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Tracy.
I think annoyingly, you have to do it by roll call because of the hybrid. I know it's silly.
Ron,
Oh, yeah. I can,
Lisa. Yes, we hear you. Ron votes aye. Lisa.
Aye.
Oh, you're muted, Lisa. I'll come back to Lisa. Mary.
Mary, aye.
Arthur. Aye. John, aye. And Lisa.
Aye.
votes aye. Excellent.
So we know that was unanimous.
All right, learning the Robert's Rules of Order here. So the other aspect of this topic is revisiting the chair and secretary roles. Prior to Tracy stepping down, she and I were serving as co-chairs, and I've been serving as the secretary. And open to complete revision of that arrangement. I'm happy to continue serving as chair if that's the will of the group. I can't do that and be the secretary. I'm also open to, and if somebody else wants to step up as a co-chair, to considering that. So a little bit up for discussion.
I will nominate you as chair.
I'll second that, with the notation that it be chair, not co-chair. If that's agreeable to your motion.
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah. Should we vote on that first and then talk about the secretary? Yeah. Okay. Roll call vote. Lisa,
Yes.
Ron,
yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Arthur,
Yes.
John, all vote yes. That motion carries. Congratulations to me.
Condolences are in the mail too.
Despite my best efforts. Is there anybody interested in being the secretary?
Minutes are easy, guys. I promise. We can do it.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what to do in this scenario. So we will have to figure out a solution to this. Maybe you haven't had a long time to think about it. What was that?
Nice though.
It did. I suppose since Josh has graciously offered to take notes for this meeting, we'll just need to figure out in time for the next meeting, we can take this on.
It may be that, the new member that we get would be interested in that.
Maybe, but I don't think there's a much likelihood of being with us by the next meeting.
Yeah, you'll make a recommendation at your next
Right.
meeting and then the select board will.
No, I understand, that may be the solution. Good luck.
All right, so I think we do need to move on. So there are no disagreements. I'll follow up with folks individually after this meeting and try to twist some arms. And we will vote on secretary at the next meeting.
Since we're on positions, we're also talking about the second vacancy,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, and I was wondering if, might add third possibility. And, it's whether or not this committee might consider recommending to the select board, student representative, the climate action planning committee from, Milton High School.
Oh. I second that. It's a good idea.
You mean, to fill the select board
This would
vacancy
be a
or
new
to
position,
add?
yeah,
Yeah, so recommend to the select board to add a new
position.
position on the committee for a student. I'm certainly willing to discuss that at the next meeting. Do we need a motion? Something that we,
You don't need a motion.
yeah, plan to put on the agenda. I like the second one. Okay. So, if there are no objections, I'd like to move on to the fourth item on the agenda.
Do we, Mr. Chair, do we want to go back to the,
For the third item.
vacancy for the, Chamber of Commerce Representative?
We can do that.
And see how we want to, tackle that vacancy, which is now 6+ months open.
That's true. I'm happy to discuss it. I will share that, as part of the expert outreach process, Mary and I did reach out to Joe Palovecchio, who's president of the Chamber of Commerce, and we haven't connected on a time yet. It's mostly my fault. But I think that's certainly one of the things that we would discuss when we do meet, and they had offered for us to present at an upcoming Chamber of Commerce meeting. It's probably an opportunity we should take advantage of to invite them to select someone. Any other thoughts?
That's a good forum into which to introduce. They may, I don't, other than conversation with Joe Palovecchio, I'd hazard to guess that most of the people who are members of the chamber don't know that there is a position on the climate action planning committee, for a member of the chamber. That's just coming out of the blue in my mind. I could be radically wrong, ever in the past, but, by having an opportunity to meet with them and explain the work and extend an invitation might be the way to go.
Yeah, I think when the committee was initially advertised, it was probably a little unclear what it would entail. If we can make that somewhat clearer now. Any other comments on this topic?
I also reached out by email to the chamber, but I have not heard back.
All right, so if there are no objections, let's move on to the third item on the agenda, starting off with board, which is a discussion. Sorry, I'm looking at two different ones. So I see what I did. Okay, this is on the public agenda, the third item. Report out from committee members about feedback from experts on mitigation recommendations. So we wanted to spend a good amount of time on this, we budgeted about 30 minutes. As we discussed at the last meeting, our homework was to begin engaging experts, try to have one or two conversations between last meeting and this meeting, and be prepared to share back what you heard. I think we should go around the virtual table here and let's see, compare it to 6 of us, 30 minutes. 3 or 4 minutes each. Talk about who we met with and the sort of key things that we heard. Shall we start on the Zoom. Lisa or Ron, just one of you want to go first?
Lisa, you want to go?
Sure. So just a reminder, I have transportation. I reached out to all of the PTOs for the elementary schools, middle school and high school. I reached out to the Chamber of Commerce. I reached out to the Traffic Commission and Bike Milton and Massachusetts Safe Routes to School. I only heard back from the Glover PTO. I spoke with Ellie Fisher, and I also heard back from Vivian Ortiz, who's the regional, let's see, she's the senior outreach coordinator and bike education lead for Massachusetts Safe Routes to School. So both conversations were very fruitful, and both parties are interested in partnering with us. A lot of the conversation was just an exchange of information about this is what the committee is doing. And then Vivian told me a lot about what the Safe Routes to School does. I asked Ellie, who's the PTO rep for Glover, about what she thought barriers were to using, walking, biking and whatnot. And so, I got some good feedback there, and they're very interested to partner with us and be a resource both to, help implement any of our action items, as well as, as a outreach to families at the school. So I'm hoping to hear back from the other PTOs. I might try some other routes. It's possible they're not checking their organizational emails that often. And I'll pass it on to Ron unless there's any questions about that.
I'd love to hear one or two of the key obstacles to biking to school that they told you about.
Feeling safe is a big one. Identifying intersections that could maybe use crossing guards or could use additional measures to make it feel safe. Of course, convenience and whatnot is probably a factor. There is a group of parents at Glover, a green team group, and Ellie is part of that. So she feels like there would be a group of parents interested in, working to change behavior. But I think, safety is the big one, and an education of, well, what are some of the safe routes to school, right? Which is what the other organization does, and what could be done to make them safer that maybe isn't even that hard to do. We discussed how end of August would be a really prime time to start this outreach, because that's when parents are very engaged in making plans for how, they're going to get their kids to and from. She talked about another barrier was just knowing who the other families are. So you could coordinate, one, carpooling, and two, friends walking to school together. A group of kids walking together feels safer than just one child walking alone.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Yeah. And then Vivian has been car free for 15 years, and I ended up seeing her the next day at the grocery store.
Right. Ron, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I spoke to representatives of 4 organizations about our draft conservation lands plan for the Climate Action Committee plan. And with the goal in mind of getting more information and for getting their engagement in our goal of doing an assessment of the mitigation and adaptation issues connected to the conservation lands, mainly the Blue Hills and the Neponset River. I know there are all sorts of mini conservation patches around the town, but we've decided to, for the time being, just focus on those. So Arthur Doyle and I had some very good correspondence, and he provided information about help me fill in the details of the actual location and size of the town of Milton's holdings of these larger conservation areas, the Blue Hills and the Neponset River, as did a representative from the town's Public Works Department, who also gave me that information. I also spoke with Matt, I think the fellow that's nominated to be a member of our committee from the Friends of the Blue Hills, and he was super enthusiastic for the idea of doing a survey and then having the survey lead to a conservation lands climate plan, and offered the participation of several members of the Friends of the Blue Hills who have very good technical skills to do this. I also spoke with a representative from the Neponset River Valley Association and a representative from the DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation. They also, in a very, very brief phone call, were enthusiastic about our draft document and promised to get back to me, but I have not yet heard from them.
So are there any questions for Ron?
Ron, I just wanted to say you had a glowing review in the Times today. I thought that was a wonderful background to your work.
No, who is that guy? I don't know. It caught me by surprise. This was not preordained, just so you know.
Right, John, would you like to go next?
Well, I don't have much to say. I thought Lisa would connect with me to do some with her, and we didn't connect, so I don't have anything there. In terms of heat waves, which we're not talking about yet, I see the people in the Council of Aging, people at Milton Hospital, such as Mr. Fernandez, the head of the hospital, and Dr. Baravecchio, who's the head of the staff. There is people that I will eventually talk to.
And, yeah, we should put a pin in it, but we should discuss when we're gonna get to key action recommendations for those topics. And I mean, if you're ready sooner than the rest of us, we maybe could add that on sooner so you can get going with those conversations. Okay. I don't want you to feel like you're held back by not having put it on the agenda yet. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to, I'll share his contact info with you after this, but as part of our regional estuary climate action group that Arthur is involved in, we had a presentation at our last meeting from gentleman from the Museum of Science who's done some good heat wave mapping research and overlaying heat waves with historic homeowners lending corporation red line maps. So to identify some environmental justice links, David Sidenfeld. So I'll send you his contact.
Mary, would you like to?
Yeah, well, you'll have to fill in our gaps, right?
Yeah.
Alex and I had a few folks that we reached out to. As mentioned, we reached out to Joe Pavalacchio, I apologize, from the Chamber of Commerce. We have yet to set time up, but definitely like to engage. We also are going to connect with the school committee, Sean O'Rourke. That is something that was recommended to us, by Town Administrator Nick Milano, as well as Consolidated Facilities, Chris Hayden. We did connect with, Nick, Town Administrator. We did connect with, Chris Hayden, although I know he's moving, really good guy. And we also, I'm sorry, John Kiernan from the conservation, really nice. We learned a lot, I felt like, in our conversation, just in terms of, contextually, John has a lot of history. Related to, I think there's a couple of proposals for a wind turbine at the Granite Links golf course and whatnot. He gave us some history around that, where they've kind of sought out some renewable space. Few different things that some lessons learned, I think, in the process. He does feel like the lease at the quarry, I was saying like 20 years, like we should go back and think about putting some renewable generation.
I didn't catch exactly when the lease is coming up, but it's in the next 5 years or so.
Yeah, so there might be an opportunity for us to think about that. Facilities, Chris, and my assessment from Chris and Nick, climate's definitely, in the radar, but it's not a priority based on the other initiatives and activities in the town. So you're definitely competing with the needs, the resources for the town, be it fire, be it firehouses, facilities. They definitely do kind of one building at a time. We know this in terms of looking at where they think Bill Ritchie definitely squeezed as much as he could, $2 million out from the mass save programs. I think we kind of have to slow our roll a little bit so other towns can participate in that funding. But, given kind of, they definitely look at each building where there's an opportunity not only for lighting, heating, HVAC, the building management systems are a little bit, there's areas that can be improved just to help on some of the controls and regulations. But definitely things that, I think the town is working as they can to each building every year just to get the opportunity. What was nice was that the new fire station, I think was very thoughtful in terms of just, it's, mostly electric. The doors are definitely fossil fuel, just given kind of the cost assessment. But it's make ready for solar. So when the economics make sense, we can definitely put solar there. Just right now, that's not, it's not making the returns that, would make it a suitable option at this point. But let's feel free to fill in something more.
Sure, maybe I'll share like some key things that I heard from Nick Milano when we met with him recently. So we went through all of the key action recommendations, and I think he's a key stakeholder and partner in everything that might be there. So we started with the recommendation to hire a sustainability director. And high level, what I heard is, clearly there's scope for someone, a role like that to work on, but of course the challenge is funding it relative to the other priorities that exist. Suggested it could be easier in the short run to adjust the responsibilities of existing roles to clear up more bandwidth. And that, it's a lot easier to talk about these things once you have a lot more detail about what that person will do. So I did note that a lot of other towns that have hired a sustainability director did so after there was a climate action plan in place. It was clear that like somebody needs to do these 12 things. And he shared the context that staffing increase requests in the fire department, police department, library, and council on aging have been waiting their turn for a while. we discussed,
All of us, yeah.
yeah. So, reality, it's been interested in thinking about private funding sources with this. We talked about the increasing the default green energy content of Milton's CEA program. Next, because that's coming up for renewal this year, and the key folks who worked on that last time are not around anymore. But he did share the important context that the contract will be approved by the select board, not by him. And so that they're a key body that we would have to engage on that action item. But that he had recently heard from Good Energy LLC, which is the I'm not sure what to call it, consulting firm. The vendor that we use to, do the power purchase agreement, that they had reached out to kind of get the ball rolling on the renewal. And he suggested having them come and speak to us as part of that process. Since it's a new experience for everybody involved this time. So didn't see why we shouldn't play a role. So I thought that made sense. We talked about launching an Electrify Milton program. And I think generally like the sound of it as providing a service rather than only trying to change people's behavior. But of course, it needs to be more fleshed out before you can start trying to allocate resources. So, no immediate feedback or suggestions there, but like the idea.
He mentioned in his prior experiences of given capacity in that field, what did he mention? There was a 1 million. It wasn't a fund, it was an override that was an annual that they used for facilities. I'm not sure how he captured that. I'm not probably not saying the right word for folks that have more institutional knowledge, but he's made. So there's like it's on $1 million every year in the town of Medfield that goes solely to facilities. He said it was like an override. Is that the terminology?
I think so,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I didn't understand it well enough to want
Right.
to override at a public meeting.
Well, I don't know if that's the right word.
I mean, DPW has like regular allowances and then there's capacity for them to go beyond their budget
Okay.
to help with, dealing with emergencies, right? If there was a particularly bad storm like we didn't have on Tuesday, there's sort of budget flexibility for
Right.
DPW, but I don't know
Yeah.
mechanically how that looks.
Yeah, it was interesting context.
Any questions about that RFP? Or do you want to go next?
These would be, written up for everybody. But on January 30th, Alex, Jack Turner and I met with Chase Berkeley, who is, many of you know, is the director of the Department of Public Works in the town. And we reviewed background and possible action items that were reported out to the committee in the waste mitigation and adaptation document on January 8th. All the recommendations appeared to be acceptable to the director with unchallenged and an understanding that there'd be tweaking and refinements over time. The feedback is very positive with a willingness to engage fully with the CPAC. A couple of important points to note. One was the recognition of the cost of recycling, which used to have a breakage and provide revenue to the town of Milton, is now the same as the cost of trash collection and disposal, so that there is no revenue production from recycling at the present time. The economics of that can change over time, but there was nothing visible in the foreseeable future. Composting was a topic that was discussed, and and it was identified as being more expensive than trash management, interestingly enough. We also spoke about, and there was interest on the part of the DPW in the opportunities for collaboration with multiple communities. Food waste, that warrants an opportunity for a stakeholders meeting and the setting of requirements. It's a sensitive, relatively sensitive area, and it would have to be well planned, well thought out, and well planned for execution. One of the big topics in the meeting was the need for communication, and that ran a gamut of topics throughout the conversation. With the notation that it has to be ongoing, and that they might be developed in conjunction with the Milton Chamber of Commerce for distribution through the town clerk's office, a packet that would be going to new residents in the town of Milton, so that they would understand all of the ins and outs relative to waste management in our community. A couple of ancillary topics came up based upon comments that people had been making. One was an interest in knowing more about, this ties into communication as well, the collection of acid batteries. And how this is done, they just don't have that awareness. And the suggestion that maybe there would be repositories at places outside of the DPW yard. One person suggested maybe buying used postal service mailboxes, re-identifying them and having them at the fire stations so that people could deposit acid batteries and they would be collected at a point in time. One of the things that was related to this was that while access to the DPW yard is relatively easy, exit from the DPW
Zoom is frozen.
It is for me as well.
Maybe somebody will figure it out. Oh, good one.
I think the library left the meeting.
They're still hosted, but I can't see anything coming in from them. No sound or feed. Does anyone have the numbers of another member handy? Let me think. I'm gonna think of a workaround.
Pretty soon they'll figure it out.
I also read most of the article about you, Ron.
Yeah. I don't know. She just came up to me. I don't even know
It's
why.
very nice.
Yeah, it was a good article. Miss Tracy, she was really good.
We will really miss her.
Yeah,
She
had a
kept
nice-
us on track and focused.
yeah. She had a balanced way about her.
Yes.
And I don't know why she can't do both jobs, really.
Yeah.
Some committee of ethics?
Good people who want to do this work are hard to find.
I know.
I wonder if we left and came back, if it would work, or if it's just that they left the meeting.
No, I can almost guarantee you it's something on their end.
Okay.
And I'm wondering though, if they haven't noticed, they might be proceeding with the meeting, but with no recording and no record. So I'm trying to get back I'm trying to find as to whether or not I can get in contact with Josh. I don't know anyone else on the board.
I mean, I
you-
have their email addresses, but they're
Yeah,
probably not
it would need to
checking.
be more immediate than that.
Could we call the library? Say, hey.
Hey, you know what? That's not a bad idea. Give me a quick second.
Is that person a library techie?
Well, they could deliver the message.
Oh, yeah.
If they don't realize we're gone. Although this is being recorded, I see.
Oh, really?
Yes, but they're not, their meeting has left the recording.
What part of Milton do you live? Oh, oh, we got him.
Sorry about that, folks. Wi-Fi went down in the library.
Oh,
And I think we need to start video as well. Yeah. Oh, no, that's the owl, not.
I should just not put that.
okay, looks like we're back.
Yeah.
That's
Great. While you were away and yeah. Radical, whoever happens to have been, just hazardous waste and the collection of that in the community. A couple of thoughts that can come up on it. John mentioned that he has taken gasoline up to the DPW yard for disposal. And this ties into some people who have commented about the ways in which they dispose of gasoline and oil from lawnmowers, for example, the most predominantly lawnmowers. Nobody got into automobiles. Most people have that done at a service station rather than on a yourself basis, particularly with the change that we've had in more modern automobile. But people have acknowledged that they dig a hole in their backyard to discharge this, and they don't want to do it. And it gets back to this issue of times when they can get rid of it, which might not sync with when they are putting their equipment away for the season, for the winter. And also we discussed the fact that some communities, I mentioned that some communities and other areas of the state band together and set up a calendar among them on a rotational basis, so that there are several different times during the year when anybody, this is a collaborative type of an effort, can go to one of the other times to dispose of hazardous waste, whether it's oil-based paint, oil from equipment, gasoline products, and so on down the line. Somebody also mentioned recently that they would like to know what our recommendation was on this disposing of spark plugs. I don't know if there's something that's related to it. I said, I didn't know, but I would mention it. I said, ask them if there's any particular chemical composition about the nature of spark plugs that wasn't asked the question. They said, no, they just thought of it. But these are the types of questions that are ruminating in some people's minds. And the more we get into this previous recommendation of communication and another previous recommendation of collaboration among communities, the more we might be able to do something well beyond what's possible at the present time. Alex, any other parts to that conversation that you want to chime in on?
One thing that stuck in my mind, but that you didn't say, you mentioned that Chase told us that currently compost is more expensive. Compost processing is more expensive than trash. That was a surprise to me. I had always figured because it creates something of value, it would be less expensive. He did say, so it's currently double the cost, and that explains why we have a partnership with Black Earth going for municipal composting. But that he does expect that price differential to shift as we move towards the closure of Massachusetts remaining landfills by 2030.
Yes.
And the state also has a goal to reduce the waste stream by 50% in that time frame as well. So there's a lot of reason to believe the prices will move. And I think there's also a long lead time on getting people familiar with composting and open to it, and able to separate waste streams correctly. So there may be some, ground setting that we can do over the coming years to help the economics shift favorably.
And in addition to the economics, there was mention of the need for people to understand how to do this properly to avoid rodent infestation. Because when it's done improperly, that causes
With that
another problem.
So we were doing great on time, but then our little Wi-Fi hiccup put us a little bit behind. So with respect, I'd like to move us on to the next topic, which is, let me make sure I'm looking at the right list. Item 4, to discuss the nexus of committee recommendations and Apex recommended strategies.
Oh,
So we had set aside about, I recommend that, Josh, you want to put the Apex strategies up on the screen? It probably doesn't make sense to review them individually. But do you have any sort of high level comments that you want to make about this?
So these were picked
obvious on sort of them being useful and sort of what they see nationally as best practices. But the second reason was because the vast majority of these are quantifiable. And that is the task set before our consultants, is to take these strategies and actions and tie them to the quantifiable data they have from our greenhouse gas inventory. Some of these are generalized, but as much as possible, they want to say, when it talks about increasing electric vehicles, it's how many electric vehicles in sort of a 10-year block need to be added to sort of meet some of our goals. That analysis is still ongoing. We're expecting a sort of interim report from them a week from now, next Thursday. Whether that will be a final analysis, I doubt it, but that will be an update on their work. And so these were co-designed with my department and engineering and them, so it's not just sort of generalized best practices, which are also tied into the work we're doing already. But, you know, as I've said from the get-go, you all know, I think, generally what we ought to be doing. So hopefully none of these conversations.
So what do you, when they come back with more detail, be it fulfillment or whatnot, where does it go? Like engineering takes it on as a goal? Like, how do you guys filter that through? Because it sounds like it filters to us.
So
What if we need capital, you know, and like those types of things?
you definitely will need
Oh,
capital.
you definitely, will, yeah.
And that's I mean, the filter is how to guide your recommendation in the climate action plan, right?
Yeah.
Your job is not necessarily to figure out how to pay for your recommendations, right? Or even as a committee to be solely responsible for implementing those recommendations. The work that Apex is doing is giving us as much technical support and data as possible so that your plan that you develop as a committee is as informed as possible and takes the burden of data science, even though I know Alex, not a burden for you, but off of volunteer hands.
Right, so these are candidate goals that we could incorporate into our plan, and I think when we get that final report, they'll add greenhouse gas mitigation. Like if you actually succeeded,
The curve tool, for those who are familiar with it. So that's what they'll be using to much of their analysis. But it hasn't yet been sort of linked into the recommendations.
did folks have any an opportunity to look at this before the meeting, and any specific reactions or suggestions from that?
I have a question.
Yes, Lisa.
Is this public yet? Can we share this with experts we're interviewing?
Yes, because it's been shared at these meetings.
Okay.
Right, it's in your meeting materials. I wouldn't classify them as your recommendations, right? Like this is the conversation at the nexus between those two. So I would probably suggest coming to terms with what your sort of Venn diagram of these recommendations and your recommendations looks like before you send it out. But there's no sort of confidentiality you have to abide to with this.
Sure. And then if we have, opinions about what's on here, like what's the process for communicating that? And
talk amongst yourselves. I mean, right, like that.
you're really breaking up.
As a product that Apex will not provide further edits to their recommendations, but you may do with them what you see fit, because it's for you all and for this committee's sort of charge to develop a climate action plan.
Right.
I think our key action recommendations are editable at this point, and we should tweak and revise them as we talk to people, and as we review resources like this. That's my perspective.
Alex, can you,
Ron?
yeah, can you say a little more about the process for formalizing our action plans from here forward? Do we continue to solicit stakeholder input? At what point do the plans become finalized? I know there was talk about fitting them with neighborhoods. Or is that later on? Am I skipping ahead?
We have, the next item on the agenda is to discuss the this broader phase 2 outreach And I think that's something that will happen before we finalize our recommendations.
Okay,
I think that they need to be getting progressively more specific and less provisional, as we move through the phases of outreach. I think in phase one, it's very fluid, right? Because this is our best guess, in the starting point, but we expect that the experts we talk to will, open our eyes to new opportunities or help us be more specific. I think when we get to the point of broad outreach, we have to be more confident about recommendations, but they still can't be final, right? Because otherwise, what's the point of gathering feedback? So only after we've done both, and we haven't finalized our outreach plan, we're gonna discuss that next, but that's the model we've been discussing.
Mr. Chairman, it's
okay, thank you.
it's a robust document with a lot of substantive content.
The strategy.
Yes. And some people will be familiar with information in one segment, but none of the other information. Some may not be particularly familiar with what would have this content altogether. So I was wondering if we might be thinking about not only how we complete this, but how we ultimately present it to the audiences that we want to consume it and act upon it. Excuse me, so.
I mean, the Apex recommendations, you are the audience. It was explicitly created for work of this committee, so, I think translating these when you make your recommendations is important, but I wouldn't worry about this document being as accessible to the general public at this point.
That was my
I
reaction.
mean,
If I may, I'm sorry, Ron, I understand, but it's the intermediary audiences.
Right.
They're the ones that are going to probably influence the directions in which the content goes. So we want to make sure, looking back, being on boards, committees, and the information coming in, depending upon how it's presented, you help to formulate what the endorsement of a committee or board might have to be, what priorities they might concur with or disagree with, things of that nature. But it's the only observation I was making.
And Ron, you wanted to say something?
yeah, I'm just saying with my and Maggie's little piece of this, the conservation lands. Excuse me. There's only so much farther that we can go. I mean, we can ask and get people's organizational support for the idea of doing a survey and developing a plan. But if we go much further than that, we're actually doing the work, which is part of our proposal. We'd like to get a grant to enable us to do.
Um, So I'm hearing a need for, I think we focused on key recommendations to start circulating because every stakeholder's ability and willingness to absorb a huge amount of detail in a meeting is limited, ourselves included. I think that the final official plan will have much more detail in it than we're having in these discussions. We probably need to come up with a way of managing a full inventory of potential recommendations, knowing that it's just it will not be possible to get broad-based feedback and endorsement all the way down to the tiniest action item on every list. So we can put our heads together offline and discuss that at the future meeting. But yeah, I do think we should start incorporating specifics like these and other things that we're hearing or thinking about into a more detailed document related to your area. And just speaking for myself, I printed this up too small, took some notes on it, but I went over the energy and building section. Row by row, I felt that a lot of these, especially the ones under goals 1 and 2, overlap with our recommendations. They talked about increasing the energy content of the CEA, green energy content of the CEA program. They recommended going all the way to 100% right away. We're recommending something else, but I think it's the same basic set of things we can do there. Next several were all things that I would imagine as being in scope for a Milton electrification program, advocating for better incentives, doing public outreach to make people aware of incentives and it's like that all fits well within what we were already thinking about with more, a higher level of detail. Then under the third goal, I had a question.
Ron,
There were
I got this.
adopting sort of all electric building standard for town buildings, going to LEED green building standards, having disclosure requirements for property sales, and going for net zero code. And I had questions as to whether under the Massachusetts building code system where you have the three options that you can opt into, whether some of these recommendations are actually legal in Massachusetts.
So, in terms of legality and building code, we, as a town, can adopt whatever sort of standards we would like for our municipal buildings. Right, the school building committee, as in most sort of buildings, will use the standards as their ceiling rather than the floor, but that's not necessarily what you have to do. We can, set a more ambitious, for instance, fleet sort of purchasing policy. The net zero code, the specialized code, the building code,
Yes, it's not.
does apply to municipal buildings.
Right.
So already, if in our annual town meeting, we adopt the specialized code, that will set us pretty much at net zero for municipal buildings, particularly as we need to be building typically larger buildings. As most of the sort of construction needs are around the small scale of our existing infrastructure. So it will apply to us. Whether we adopt a stricter and a higher standard is still up to us, especially things that are related to buildings, but not specifically building energy, such as certain low impact design regulations. And
So you can have stricter building requirements implemented through zoning than you have in the building code, is that?
yes, and because this is specifically about municipal buildings, we can set internal sort of guiding ambitions that are not, because municipal buildings don't have to apply, have to have the zoning code apply to them, but the building code does apply.
I found it hard to believe that the town would sort of make a commitment without having specific cost benefit in front of them to build, say, a school in a certain way. Because the bill could surprise you, right? But hopefully it's and there's a lot of evidence to believe that all electric construction is economically superior as well as environmentally superior.
Yeah, and I
We
mean,
had
these
a-
recommendations.
we had an aspirational standard and sort of a commitment to at least do that cost benefit analysis of their progress. Any other comments? Fine.
One of the actions was for transportation was just providing more bike racks. And I feel like that is definitely not what's preventing people from biking. So that was just one thing that stuck out, but a lot of it, I think, there's a lot that's very good there. So.
All right. Well, if there are no objections, I'd like to keep us moving along. We're running a little further behind now. The next item on the agenda is to discuss phase 2 of the public outreach plan. And within that, there's 3 parts to it. Josh and Jack have put together some high-level suggestions for us. We circulated a document. I'd like to speak to that for a few minutes. That'd be great. We could claw back a little bit of that time here if we awesome. And then we wanted to spend the committee portion of this kind of aligning on a definition of success. We can commit to doing certain activities and we can try to measure the effectiveness of those activities, but we have to have some goalposts that we're shooting for. I think it would be nice if every single person in Milton knew in detail what we're up to, but that may or may not be feasible. And working towards sort of voting to finalize a plan and goals for outreach at our next meeting. Okay, so Josh, do you want to go over your recommendations?
Yeah, so Tracy, in one of her departing requests, asked me to prepare a brief memo for you all on some public outreach recommendations and sort of clarity on what sort of support you receive as a town committee as opposed to a group of volunteers generally. It's broken down into the sort of ways that we typically do outreach. It's not, I'll say it's not exhaustive because there's always more ways to do outreach, but this basically all the ways we have done outreach in the past. So if you want to do something that's novel, you're welcome to do that, but I can't tell you from my experience how we've done that before. It's all sort of detailed, but you have a web page which is currently pretty bare, as we produced relatively little work product at this point. But that can be kind of created to suit whatever whims you'd like to see on it. If sort of post the resources that you're gathering from sort of national best practices or other sort of useful videos, images, anything can look there. The new website has additional sort of capacity for embedding web pages if you're running a survey, as was mentioned. You can embed that survey on your web page. We also have our resilience and sustainability sort of central page, which has all sorts of relevant resources that you are welcome to suggest that we add to it, and we will. We had a sort of Girl Scout leader email us the other day to ask to add something more about composting. Gardener's Almanac, Farmer's Almanac. We had a good exchange, and so we're always welcome to that. The website is fluid. You can tell from its somewhat frequent changes and issues. We can provide additional contacts for the Milton Times, for Patriot Ledger, Dorchester Reporter. If you don't already have those sort of public contacts, typically just editor at whatever the quick access is. I won't give you much about social media because it doesn't get a lot of traction, but we do post information about the Preservation Committee often on social media. We'll produce any sort of social media content you need on X or Facebook, depending on how you want to get the word out. There's some additional information for flyering if you want to produce sort of physical flyers. If it's a limited printing, we can print that for you in town hall. If it's a larger sort of printing process, if you say you wanted to give out mailers to every house, Milton, I gave you a brief sort of cost estimate for what that would look like, sort of through the various ways we've done that in the past. I'll say those cost money and you have no money, but there are ways to figure that out when the sort of future of this committee works. So this is tips and tricks we can provide. Just to know sort of what your staff person.
So I wanted to kick off this discussion with some suggestions. One second to find that. If I get screwed up right here. So I think one thing that will be important is a list of entities and organizations that we think it's important to reach out to and at least attempt to engage. I think we can commit to reaching out. We can't necessarily commit to them all making time on their meeting agendas for us to come or even wanting that. So I think it would be valuable to whatever content would be part of our general informational session that we do, say in a public meeting, where it's like, this is who we are, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, overview of some of the recommendations we're working on. I think it would be great to have that in video form or in some kind of offline consumable format so that people don't have to physically come to a meeting if that's not actually linked to them in order to get the information. We should, of course, offer to do public in-person meetings as well. But I think getting together a list of all the neighborhood associations, the committees with overlapping responsibilities, departments that we're going to engage in, and at least sending that sort of offer of a meeting and the packet of information. And then being responsive to requests for something like a public meeting.
I was wondering if, recognizing this is a very time consuming and labor intensive activity,
Yes.
there might be a way to produce this in another medium that could then be distributed to all the entities that get identified with a protocol of their input, recommendations, questions, and so on down the line, be fed back to the Climate Action Planning Committee. And that's something that might be done simultaneously rather than iteratively. Because if we had, for example, a neighborhood association for each of the 10 precincts town, you gotta go to that whole long timeline. Whereas if we used another meeting approach, we could get to them all simultaneously. I don't want to suggest removing altogether the human element. That's very important. But figure out that in today's world of modern technology and so on down the line, if there's a new way of accomplishing this in the interest of the community and the town.
I agree heartily myself. Do you want to say something? John, would you like
I think a new way would be great, but I think, we just saw a great example of the old fashioned way of working. Where this town election, that came up with a no vote, was related to, I think, a lot of people going around knocking on doors. Because more people came to my house trying to convince me to vote no than tried to convince me to vote yes. And, I think, you know, I don't want to get into it, but the no idea was not a good idea to start with. And yet, because these people made an effort and came around and talked to individual people, I think they convinced a lot of people, obviously. And I think that kind of effort, it just goes a long way. And so that if we could get some organizations and get a group of people together to actually go knocking on doors with some handout material that would really get the message across would be by far the best way to go.
Do you think we could combine the two approaches?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. But I think we need that personal approach more than anything, because otherwise I think there's a good chance a lot of people will just shrug off regardless of how big it is or how small it is or how distilled it is. If somebody knocks at their door, they're more likely to read it than, but it just comes in the mail or is some other mass consumption.
Thanks for that. Ron is trying to raise his hand.
Yeah, I don't think we're at the point yet where we're asking people to vote yes or no on our climate action plan. I think what we're really trying to do is to get input into a draft document. And so I think it's important to produce a draft document, however raw and unfinished it might be, that people can look at, comment on, add things to. It would be great to put it on the website, put it out on social media. But I think, if we're going to do greater outreach, the point of doing the greater outreach, to me at least, is what do you think? Here we have a draft climate action plan. Please review it. We'd welcome your input on what it's proposing to do.
That makes a lot of sense to me. So is this, let me repeat it back to you to see if I heard what you were saying. You would suggest that a sort of complete draft climate action plan be pulled together at the end of phase one as the sort of basis document for the phase two outreach.
That's right, yes.
Trying to get out there, let people know what we're doing, that we exist. And the call to action is, here's the document.
We need your input.
We really need your buy-in, your feedback, your suggestions.
Right.
And then of course we can target people who are particularly interested in particular actions for more people.
Right.
So I think we need to keep moving forward here, but I will take that input and try to coalesce it into something that we should vote on for the next meeting. What I could use from all of you in preparing that is your list of all the organizations that you think need to be on that list for phase two outreach. And maybe some of it is digital and efficient, as Arthur suggested. But who are going to make a proactive effort to engage. I think if we've all put our heads together, we can come up with a fairly complete list to work through.
Just one other note on this conversation. That when all of the organizations meet it doesn't mean that everybody in their sphere is involved, and if we combine, that's why I mentioned not do the human element, but Sean's suggesting, Ron's comments and my comments, then a person who can't get to a neighborhood association maybe, but is in that neighborhood, maybe doesn't belong to the neighborhood association, which would be probably true for most neighborhoods, would nevertheless be able to access it through a
Right.
medium. Neighborhood association might help us by setting it to their membership list so that people who can't get to a congregation can do what we were suggesting.
That's what I was suggesting earlier, that if we have a presentation that we're gonna do at each one of these things, rather than like doing a Zoom of a public meeting where there's all these formalities that are necessary in person, but it's really tough to watch later on YouTube. We could just record it as a more like MATV style produced video. It's a little more engaging to watch and more efficient to watch as well. All right, are there any further topics on the, comments on this topic? Ron?
Just one more comment. I do think that we need someone or a couple of people to pull together the various recommendations into a draft document that we can share and put out for people's input.
I do think I will, I'll incorporate that in the draft plan, because the draft engagement plan for next time, because I
Okay,
think that's a good suggestion.
okay.
Great.
I had a
So
quick
moving,
question.
sorry,
Um,
Lisa.
There's a green fair coming up in Milton. Is that Sustainable Milton that's putting that out?
It is, yeah.
I mean, could we have a table there to,
I think
to
we almost
start?
certainly could. We have to check the timing of it and the timeline for getting our materials together, but even if we don't have anything formal to share at that point,
Right.
probably being there would not be a bad move.
I think just
I will
publicizing
be
our existence would be
there because
great. I'm
yes,
sorry, you guys are breaking up and are frozen.
great. Thank you for the suggestion. It's a good one. All right, so let's move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is draft discussion of the draft student survey that Kira Nosal has put together for us, and I apologize that we're getting to you a little late in the meeting. Thank you for sitting through it. So I will turn the floor over to you. Do you want to introduce yourself briefly and tell us about your survey?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Kira. I'm a senior at Milton High, and I'm doing this as part of my AP Government Civic Action Project. And in the first semester of the school year, I took Climate Crisis, which is a class that I didn't even know was offered at my school, and I didn't even realize how blind I was to all the effects of climate change. So it really opened up my eyes to the fun that I'm so much more passionate about it now. For the survey, I pretty much entirely based it off of the Framingham survey, which Tracy had sent to me so that I could look at it. And the way it's organized is a ranking of kind of like severe weather patterns and getting more like green and renewable sources in Milton, and how important students think these are and how much they want the committee to address them in their plan. So it's just a way to get students involved. I'm hoping that they'll be interested in it. But again, I didn't learn a lot about climate change until very recently, and so I do think that there's a kind of like lack of awareness when it comes to climate change. And so also high schoolers in my experience, do not like filling out surveys, even when it's required, it's a drag. So I tried to make this like very quick, and painless, so hopefully we can get some results. I'm planning to send it out after February break, so in 2 weeks, and then I'll collect responses and highlight it for you guys.
All high school?
All high school.
Okay.
Are there any comments or questions for Kira?
So it's like 350?
I have a comment.
It's gonna be the whole school.
Whole school.
So hopefully as many as over 1,000 students, but
Okay. Yeah.
we'll see.
Ron?
Yeah. Can you add a question about where do you get your information about climate change?
Uh-huh.
I mean, my experience is very often people get information about climate from sources that are not really about climate.
Yeah.
But I think knowing the answer to that would be informative. If that's true, then we'll see it in the data.
There's a couple open responses, I think.
Yeah.
4
Okay.
or 3. And then there's, I think, 22 or 23 multiple choice. And so
Oh,
a
those
decent
are
amount,
good.
not too
Those are good.
I've seen other towns' climate action plans will have, not just the plan, but sort of breakout, figures that will have things like, survey attitudes. I find, for many people, the perspective of the younger generations is really important on this issue. Because, problem we're handing down to them.
Tracy has.
Lisa, I see your
Yeah.
hands up there.
I'd love to see a question about how students get to and from school and why they make that choice.
Yeah, I'll definitely add that in.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for putting that together.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, of course.
It might be helpful, if we can get it, when were you planning on sending this again?
Hopefully right after February break.
So soon. Yeah, we've got. If we could embed it in the sort of intro section, get you a link to at least the climate, our committee webpage, not that there's a lot there yet. How many of them are gonna bookmark it and come back again later, but it seems like an
It's just a school-wide distribution.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna give it to my climate crisis teacher to send out,
Okay.
because I feel like also coming from a teacher, it'll be more credible.
Is there, at some point I signed up for town's RSS feed where I get agenda updates. Maybe the call to action, so that we can take advantage of having gotten them to fill out one survey, which is actually kind of a big deal, right? If there was a call to action to like sign up for updates. Subscription. Just so that they know what the retention rate would be.
If anyone's curious, so our new website, this is the sort of calendar page, if you're, you're here, with all these useful things. First and foremost, under community, there's resilience and sustainability, there's all these tools that are covered up by Lisa and Ron people, but on the public meetings calendar, you can either subscribe to iCalendar to get this calendar put into your Google Calendar or Apple Calendar, or press this button called Notify Me. And then it'll walk you through steps you have to create an account, because everything needs to create a little account, but it's not hard. It doesn't require, any social security numbers or credit cards. And then you just pick which different committees, agendas you'd like to either be texted or emailed or both to you. It's not super good as a sort of user interface, but this is what we got.
I forgot, I guess I must have done that at one point, I've forgotten how many steps it was. My experience with Sustainable Milton is that if your call to action has more than 3 clicks, then you don't get any other.
Well, if the call to action gets them first to the Notify Me page, it's just sign in and then click on whichever one you want to be notified to. So there's just more clicks if you're starting from the homepage.
Maybe we can follow up offline to see if there's anything realistic that we could do. There any other questions?
Sure, fair. So you'll be, sending out the survey shortly after the February vacation, when students have finally wrapped their minds about being back in school. When do you want themselves back?
So hopefully, like with the probably, but I can't make like a hard deadline on this one, so they could still trickle in. I'm hoping to be able to compile data to be able to get to you guys for the next meeting.
Great, so your calendar.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's exactly. Sorry.
So we'll just go to all the students in the high school.
Yeah.
Do you have what grade they're in? What grade the respondent is in?
I put that I won't collect, people's information because I feel like keeping it anonymous might help. So I won't be able to see who sent it in. Like what they're.
Just thinking there might be differences between
Yeah.
freshmen and
It's a
seniors.
fair point, yeah.
That, there would be, some meaningful information.
Yeah, I definitely can collect, just, I'll be able to see people's graduation recognitions. I can search that one.
Well, yes, thank you again so much for taking the initiative to do this. At the very least, it'll be a great way to let the whole student community know that this is going on, and it's going to be really interesting to hear what they're thinking. So I gotta get there about. I think they're sorted, okay. So I think that's the last business topic, and next is staff update.
Yeah, I've spoken a lot, but just a couple of sort of related things that are not on your agenda. 2 events are coming up that you might be interested in, or your friend might be interested in. Next Tuesday, 20th, myself and our microgrid consultants will be here in the Keys Room at 6:30, providing the final of 3 public forums to discuss their current draft feasibility analysis. The high level is that we've analyzed the energy usage at Town Hall, at Milton PD, and at Winter Valley, and they've come up with a proformas for installing local solar energy and battery storage, along with some microgrid controllers at all 3 of those sites. Based off of their analysis, there's about just over $400,000 in terms of costs that are not covered by existing sort of known loans and incentive programs that will need to be filled in with grant funding or capital funding. So that report is online now at townofmilton.org/microgrid. So folks have had a week to see it. We'll be bringing large print format as well for those with harder sort of visual needs, to be read at the meeting itself, and we'll be providing food if that motivates anybody. So we're here at 6:30 on Tuesday, and then a week from that, on the 27th, the EPA is hosting their next public forum on the Lower Napontet Superfund site. That'll be at the Hyde Park Community Center. The primary topic will be a mechanism called a Community Advisory Group, or a CAG. That was something that we noted a particular desire for, and now we're taking it up. That is a sort of official EPA mechanism that community involvement coordinators use to disseminate information through the community, as well as gain internal sort of stakeholder input when they do their work for cleanups. There's no sort of details on what the membership will be like, or when that call will go out, but that will likely be discussed at that meeting on the 27th. Staff will be there, so no obligation to, but always useful to attend as much as possible. And just a final update, given the results of yesterday's vote, some integral grant funding opportunities that are relevant to your work are no longer available, sort of period. And then a number of the other ones that might be sort of not listed in the grant programs that we are ineligible for are unlikely to be awarded to us. That includes the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, land, which is a sort of acquisition program for acquiring conservation land, and a number of other, any sort of programs managed by EEA, the Executive Office of Energy.
Yeah.
Energy Environmental Affairs are effectively forfeit. So as Alex sort of touched on earlier, private funding or towns capital funding will likely be the available sources when we start thinking about implementation work, depending on how our compliance sort of is when we get those.
For that goes fast.
I can't say as to when it will move, but the Attorney General has made it clear she intends to move swiftly on bringing us back into compliance, however she sees fit. So, thankfully, you're not elected, so you don't need to, unless you're town meeting members, you don't need to worry about your cell phone or email data. But anyone who's elected, please don't delete any of your communications. Also, everything has legal action.
Great. Right, well, thank you for that update. And the final item on our agenda is public comment. I don't see anybody on the Zoom who's not part of the committee. Am I mistaken?
No.
Okay, so there's no one for public comment. In which case we can move on to item 9, which is adjournment. If anybody would like to move that we adjourn this meeting, I'd be happy to accept your motion.
John moved.
So moved.
So.
Do you have a second? Mary seconds. All right. Ron votes yes. Lisa
Yes.
votes yes. Mary?
Yes.
Yes. Mark votes yes. I vote yes.
Yes.
All right, it
When is
is
our next
unanimous. This meeting.
When is our next
What's
meeting?
that?
When is our next meeting?
Oh, that's a good question. So,
21st, Thursday?
yeah, continuing with the pattern,
I mean, is that, so.
it's the third Thursday of the month, right? That is
Thursday, Sunday, first.
21st of March.
Spring.
In my, sort of awfulness that.
Maybe.
Nobody's birthday. No, family members whose birthday. Did anybody have any conflicts with that?
I'll be working on the board on this 21st.
Okay. Anybody else for whom that's a conflict? So I guess for now, we'll stick with that. Yes. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Stay warm.